Sarah Mitchell gripped the steering wheel tighter as the snowflakes turned from gentle flutters into angry bullets against her windshield. The December evening had started peacefully enough when she picked up her 8-year-old twin daughters, Emma and Lucy, from their piano lesson in town. Now, just 20 minutes into their drive home to the rural farmhouse, nature had unleashed its fury. The radio crackled with static before the emergency broadcast cut through clearly. All residents are advised to seek immediate shelter. This is now a Category 4 blizzard with winds exceeding 60 miles per hour. Do not attempt travel on rural roads. Emma pressed her face against the back window, watching the world disappear behind them. "Mommy, I can't see the road anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Lucy, always the braver of the twins, squeezed her sister's hand. "It's okay, Em. Mom knows these roads like the back of her hand. We'll be home soon." But Sarah's confidence was cracking like ice under pressure. She had driven County Road 47 hundreds of times, but now every landmark had vanished under the white curtain. The tall oak tree that marked the halfway point, the red barn that signaled the final turn, even the fence posts that lined the road, everything had become invisible ghosts in the storm. The heater in their old Honda was working overtime, but Sarah could feel the cold seeping through the windows. She reached over to turn up the heat, and in that split second of distraction, the car hit a patch of black ice hidden beneath the fresh snow. The vehicle spun once, twice, then slid sideways off the road. Sarah felt her stomach drop as they crashed through a wooden fence and came to rest in a snow-filled ditch. The engine coughed once and died, taking the heat and lights with it. For a moment, silence filled the car except for their rapid breathing and the howling wind outside. Sarah's hand shook as she tried to restart the engine. Nothing. She tried again. "Still nothing, Mom." Emma's voice was small and scared now. "It's all right, girls. Just a little car trouble." Sarah forced her voice to sound calm while her mind raced through their options. They were at least 3 miles from home, maybe 4. The nearest house belonged to old Mr. Peterson, but that was over a mile away through open fields. In this storm, it might as well have been on the moon. She pulled out her cell phone, praying for a signal. No bars. The remote location that usually gave them peace and quiet had become their enemy. Sarah turned to face her daughters, both bundled in their winter coats but already shivering. Their cheeks were starting to turn pink from the cold creeping into the car. She had to make a decision fast. "Listen to me very carefully," she said, keeping her voice steady. "We're going to stay right here in the car where it's safer. We'll wait for the storm to pass and someone will come looking for us." But even as she spoke the words, Sarah knew they were in serious trouble. The temperature was dropping fast, and without the engine running, the car would become an icebox within hours. She had seen enough news stories about people found frozen in their cars after blizzards to know how this could end. Lucy noticed her mother's worried expression. "Mommy, why do you look scared?" "You never look scared." Sarah reached back and touched both girls' faces, her heart breaking at how cold their skin already felt. "I'm not scared, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about how to keep us warm until help arrives." She gathered all the blankets and extra clothes from the back of the car, wrapping the twins together like a cocoon. Then she climbed into the back seat with them, pulling them close to share body heat. The storm raged around them, rocking the small car with each powerful gust of wind. As the first hour passed, Sarah felt the cold beginning to win its battle against their body heat. The girls had stopped talking and were breathing in short, shallow puffs. Emma's lips were turning blue and Lucy's eyes kept drooping shut despite Sarah's efforts to keep her awake. "Tell us a story, Mom," Lucy whispered through chattering teeth. Sarah's mind went blank. How could she tell them a happy story when she wasn't sure they would see morning? Instead, she began to sing softly, the same lullaby she had sung to them as babies. Her voice mixed with the wind, creating a strange harmony that seemed to push back against the storm's violence. Outside, the snow continued to pile up around their car, slowly burying them in a white tomb. Sarah pressed her face against the window and couldn't see anything but solid white. They were completely cut off from the world. As the second hour began, Sarah made a terrible realization. The girls were no longer shivering. In hypothermia, the body stops shivering when it begins to shut down. Their breathing had become even more shallow, and when she touched their hands, their fingers felt like ice. She shook them gently. "Emma, Lucy, stay with me. Keep your eyes open." Emma's eyes fluttered open briefly. "I'm so tired, Mommy. Can I just sleep for a little while?" "No, baby. You need to stay awake. Talk to me about school. Tell me about your friends. But the girls were losing their fight against the cold. Sarah held them tighter, trying to give them all her warmth, but she could feel her own strength fading. Her thoughts were becoming fuzzy, and moving her arms required enormous effort. The storm showed no signs of stopping. If anything, it seemed to be getting worse. Sarah closed her eyes and prayed harder than she had ever prayed in her life. Not for herself, but for her daughters. They were so young, with so much life ahead of them. As consciousness began to slip away, Sarah's last coherent thought was about the bitter irony of their situation. Just 5 miles away lived Marcus Johnson, the man who had made her life miserable for the past 2 years with the property dispute over the fence line between their farms. The man she had called her enemy was probably warm and safe in his house, completely unaware that 3 lives were slipping away in the storm. Marcus Johnson paced his kitchen floor like a caged animal, his German shepherd Rex watching every step with alert brown eyes. The storm had been raging for over 2 hours now, and something felt wrong. He couldn't put his finger on it, but 30 years of farming had taught him to trust his instincts. He pressed his face against the frosted window, trying to see beyond his front yard. The security light barely penetrated 3 feet into the whirling snow. He had lived through plenty of Nebraska blizzards, but this one felt different. More violent, more dangerous. Rex whined softly and padded to the front door, his ears perked forward. The dog had been restless all evening, moving from window to window as if searching for something in the storm. "What is it, boy?" Marcus asked, running his weathered hand through the dog's thick fur. "You hear something out there?" The truth was, Marcus couldn't shake the image of Sarah Mitchell and her twin daughters. He had seen them driving through town earlier when he stopped at the hardware store. The girls had been laughing in the back seat, their faces pressed against the windows, completely unaware of the storm warnings that were just starting to come through on the radio. Marcus and Sarah had been locked in a bitter property dispute for 2 years. It started when a surveyor discovered that the fence line between their properties had been placed wrong decades ago. Sarah claimed 3 acres of his best pasture land, and Marcus fought back with lawyers and harsh words. They had stopped speaking except through attorneys. But sitting in his warm kitchen while the storm raged outside, Marcus found himself thinking about those little girls. Emma and Lucy, if he remembered right. They would be terrified in weather like this. Rex barked once, sharp and urgent, then scratched at the door. "You want to go out in that mess?" Marcus shook his head. "You're crazy, dog," but Rex wouldn't give up. He barked again, more insistent this time, then ran to the window and back to the door. His behavior was completely unlike his normal calm demeanor. Marcus checked his watch. 8:30. If Sarah and the girls had left town around 6:30 after their music lesson, they should have been home by now. The drive to her farm was only about 20 minutes in good weather. He tried to push the thought away. Sarah Mitchell was his enemy. She was trying to steal his land, the same land his grandfather had worked for 50 years. She had called him stubborn and greedy in front of half the town during their last court appearance. Why should he worry about her? But the worried feeling in his gut wouldn't go away. Marcus had lost his own wife and son in a car accident 10 years ago. He knew firsthand how quickly a peaceful evening could turn into tragedy. Rex scratched at the door again, more frantically this time. All right, Marcus muttered, grabbing his heavy coat from the hook by the door. "But we're not staying out long in this weather." He bundled up in his warmest gear, thick boots, insulated coveralls, wool hat, and heavy gloves. Rex danced around his feet, eager to get outside. Marcus attached a thick rope to Rex's collar and tied the other end around his own waist. In a storm like this, they could lose each other in seconds. The moment Marcus opened the door, the wind hit them like a physical blow. The cold was so intense it took his breath away. Snow immediately began collecting on his jacket and filling his boots. Rex pushed forward into the storm, pulling Marcus along. "This is crazy!" Marcus shouted over the wind, but Rex seemed to know exactly where he wanted to go. They struggled across Marcus's front yard, then down his long driveway to the main road. The snow was already knee-deep and getting deeper by the minute. Each step was a battle against the wind and the weight of the snow. Rex kept pulling toward the east in the direction of Sarah's farm. Marcus tried to turn back twice, convinced they were on a fool's errand, but Rex refused to give up. The dog pulled harder, whining urgently whenever Marcus tried to change direction. After struggling through the storm for nearly 20 minutes, Marcus was ready to give up. His face felt numb despite his wool mask. and his fingers were starting to lose feeling inside his heavy gloves. This was exactly the kind of situation that killed people. He was about to turn around when Rex suddenly stopped and began barking frantically. At first, Marcus couldn't see anything except swirling snow. Then, as a gust of wind briefly cleared the air, he caught a glimpse of something dark against the white. A car tilted at an odd angle in the ditch beside the road. His heart stopped. Even covered with snow, he recognized the dark blue Honda, Sarah's car. Marcus pushed through the snow as fast as he could, Rex leading the way. When he reached the car, he could barely make out three shapes huddled together in the back seat, through the frost-covered windows. They weren't moving. "Sarah," he shouted, pounding on the window. No response. He tried the door handle, but it was frozen shut. Using his pocket knife, he scraped away the ice around the door frame and tried again. This time it opened with a loud crack. The scene inside the car nearly broke his heart. Sarah was curled around her twin daughters, all three of them blue-lipped and unconscious. Their breathing was so shallow he could barely see their chests moving. "Sarah, can you hear me?" He shook her shoulder gently but got no response. Marcus knew he had only minutes to act. In hypothermia this severe, they could die at any moment. He couldn't carry all three of them at once, and he couldn't leave any of them behind to make multiple trips. Rex seemed to understand the urgency. The dog pressed close to the car, adding his body heat to the small space while Marcus made his decision. He would have to take them one at a time to his truck, which he had parked at the end of his driveway. It was their only chance, even though moving them in their condition was dangerous. Marcus lifted Emma first, her small body frighteningly light and cold. She didn't stir at all as he wrapped her in his coat and began the struggle back through the storm. Rex stayed behind with Sarah and Lucy, as if he understood his job was to guard them until Marcus returned. The trip to his truck felt like it took hours, though it was probably only 10 minutes. Marcus placed Emma gently in the back seat and turned the heater on full blast. Then he grabbed more blankets from his emergency kit and headed back into the storm. Lucy was next. She was slightly heavier than her sister, but just as unresponsive. By the time Marcus got her to the truck, Emma was starting to show faint signs of warming. Her breathing was a little deeper, though she still hadn't opened her eyes. The third trip for Sarah was the hardest. She was much heavier than the girls, and Marcus's strength was failing after fighting the storm for over an hour. Rex helped by breaking trail through the snow, and somehow Marcus managed to get Sarah to the truck. With all three of them in his vehicle, Marcus drove carefully through the storm to his house. Every few seconds he checked the mirrors to make sure they were still breathing. They were alive, but barely. Once inside his warm house, Marcus laid them on blankets near his fireplace and called 911. The dispatcher told him what he already knew. No ambulance could get through until the storm passed. He was on his own. Marcus hung up the phone with shaking hands. The 911 dispatcher had been clear. No emergency vehicles could reach them until the storm passed, which might not be until tomorrow morning. The three people lying unconscious on his living room floor were entirely dependent on him now. He had dealt with hypothermia before when helping injured cattle during winter storms, but never anything this severe in humans. The dispatcher had walked him through the basics over the phone, but Marcus felt completely out of his depth. Warm them gradually. He repeated the dispatcher's instructions to himself. No direct heat. Watch for signs of cardiac arrest. Keep them flat. Monitor breathing. Rex positioned himself between Sarah and the twins, his thick fur providing additional warmth. The dog seemed to understand the gravity of the situation and hadn't moved from their side since Marcus brought them inside. Marcus started by removing their wet clothes and socks, replacing them with his own dry sweaters and thermal underwear. Their skin was pale blue-white and felt like ice to the touch. When he checked for pulses, they were so weak he could barely find them. Emma was the smallest and seemed to be responding fastest to the warmth. After about 30 minutes near the fire, her lips started to regain some pink color. Lucy was fighting harder. Her breathing remained shallow and irregular. But it was Sarah who worried Marcus the most. She was the coldest when he found her, having used her own body heat to try to keep her daughters alive. As the first hour passed, Marcus found himself talking to them constantly, partly because the dispatcher said it might help, but mostly because the silence terrified him. "Come on, Sarah, don't you dare give up now. Those girls need their mama." He adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. "I know you think I'm a stubborn old fool, and maybe you're right. But you're tougher than this storm. You've got to fight." Around midnight, Emma's eyes fluttered open for the first time. She looked around in confusion, trying to understand where she was. "It's okay, sweetheart," Marcus said softly. "You're safe now." "You're in my house. Where's Mommy?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "She's right here next to you. She's sleeping, but she's going to be fine." Marcus hoped he was telling the truth. Emma tried to sit up, but Marcus gently kept her lying down. "You need to stay warm and rest." "Do you remember what happened?" "The car got stuck. It was so cold." Tears started to form in Emma's eyes. "Is Lucy okay?" "Your sister is right there, see? She's sleeping too, but she's breathing just fine." As if hearing her name, Lucy began to stir. Her eyes opened slowly, and she immediately looked for her mother. "Mom?" Lucy's voice was stronger than Emma's had been. "I'm Marcus," he said gently. "Your neighbor. Your mom is sick from the cold, but she's going to get better. You girls are very brave." Lucy studied his face carefully. Even at 8 years old, she remembered the angry man who had argued with their mother about the fence. But something in his eyes made her feel safe. "You saved us," she said simply. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Rex saved you. He's the one who knew where to find you." Both girls looked at the big German shepherd, who wagged his tail once but didn't leave Sarah's side. Over the next several hours, Marcus worked tirelessly to care for all three of them. He made warm broth for the girls and helped them sip it slowly. He checked Sarah's pulse every few minutes and adjusted her blankets. He fed more wood to the fire and made sure the house stayed warm but not too hot. The girls gradually became more alert and talkative. They told Marcus about their piano lesson and how the storm had come out of nowhere. They talked about their mother and how scared they had been when the car stopped working. "Mommy tried to keep us warm," Emma said. "She put all the blankets on us and held us tight. She saved our lives," Lucy added. "Even when she was getting cold too." Marcus nodded, looking at Sarah's pale face. "Your mom is a hero. She loves you girls more than anything." As dawn approached, Sarah finally began to show stronger signs of recovery. Her breathing became deeper and more regular. Her skin started to warm up, though she remained unconscious. Around 6 in the morning, she started to mumble in her sleep. Marcus leaned closer to hear what she was saying. "Emma." "Lucy, stay warm," she whispered. "They're right here, Sarah," Marcus said softly. "They're safe and warm. You did good, Mama. You kept them alive." Sarah's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. She looked around the unfamiliar room in confusion, then saw her daughter sitting nearby wrapped in blankets. "Girls?" Her voice was hoarse and weak. "We're okay, Mommy," Emma said, moving closer to her mother. "Marcus saved us," Lucy added. "His dog found our car in the storm." Sarah tried to sit up, but dizziness forced her back down. She looked at Marcus with confusion and gratitude mixed in her eyes. "I don't understand," she said weakly. "Why did you—" "Because you needed help," Marcus said simply. "And those little girls needed their mama to be okay." Sarah closed her eyes, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. When she opened them again, tears were flowing down her cheeks. "I thought we were going to die," she whispered. "I couldn't keep them warm anymore. I thought I had failed them." "You didn't fail anybody," Marcus said firmly. "You kept them alive long enough for help to arrive. If you had given up even 5 minutes sooner, it might have been too late." Outside, the storm was finally beginning to weaken. The wind wasn't howling as loudly, and Marcus could see a little farther through his windows. Soon, the roads would be clear enough for an ambulance to get through. But for now, in the warm glow of his fireplace, 4 people who had been strangers just hours ago sat together like family. The property dispute that had seemed so important just yesterday felt meaningless now. Rex stretched and yawned, finally relaxing his vigilant watch. His work was done. The people he had helped save were going to be okay. Sarah reached out her hand toward Marcus. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Marcus took her hand gently. "Thank you for fighting so hard to stay alive. These girls would have been lost without you." As the morning light began to filter through the storm clouds, Marcus realized that sometimes the worst situations bring out the best in people. Sometimes enemies become heroes, and sometimes a dog's instincts can save 3 lives. The sound of sirens cutting through the morning air brought relief flooding through Marcus's tired body. After 8 hours of playing doctor and nurse, help was finally arriving. He looked out his front window and saw the ambulance struggling through the snow-covered road, followed by a county sheriff's vehicle. Sarah was sitting up now, though still weak and wrapped in blankets. The girls were much stronger, having recovered more quickly as children often do. They had even managed to eat some scrambled eggs that Marcus cooked for them an hour earlier. "The ambulance is here," Marcus announced, and saw relief wash over Sarah's face. The paramedics, Joe Martinez and Kelly Chen, were people Marcus had known for years. They burst through his front door with their equipment, stomping snow off their boots. "Marcus, what do we have here?" Joe asked, immediately kneeling beside Sarah to check her vital signs. "Severe hypothermia, all three of them. Found them around 10 last night in their car off County Road 47. They've been warming up for about 8 hours now." Kelly was already examining the twins, who were much more responsive than their mother. "How are you girls feeling? Any tingling in your fingers or toes?" "A little," Emma admitted, "but much better than before." Joe looked impressed as he checked Sarah's pulse and temperature. "Marcus, you did everything right. These folks are lucky you found them when you did. Another hour and we might have been looking at a very different outcome." Sheriff Tom Bradley came through the door next, shaking snow off his coat. Tom and Marcus had gone to high school together and had remained friends despite Marcus's tendency to keep to himself. "Heard we had some folks in trouble out here," Tom said. "Road conditions are still pretty bad, but getting better. We'll need to get statements about what happened, but that can wait until everyone's checked out at the hospital." The paramedics worked efficiently to prepare Sarah and the girls for transport. Sarah's temperature had risen enough that she was out of immediate danger, but they wanted to monitor all three of them at the hospital for at least 24 hours. As they prepared to leave, Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm. "I can't just say thank you and walk away. You saved our lives. There has to be something." Marcus shook his head. "There doesn't have to be anything. I'm just glad you're all okay." "But the property dispute, all the harsh words." Sarah's voice trailed off. "That seems pretty small right now, doesn't it?" Marcus said gently. Lucy tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Will Rex be okay by himself while we're gone?" Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in years. "Rex will be fine. He's used to taking care of himself, but you girls can come visit him when you're feeling better if your mom says it's okay." Sarah nodded, tears forming in her eyes again. "I think we'd like that very much." As the ambulance pulled away, Marcus stood in his doorway watching until the red lights disappeared around the bend. Rex sat beside him, tail wagging slowly. "Well, boy, that was quite a night, wasn't it?" Marcus scratched behind the dog's ears. "You're a hero, you know that?" Rex barked once as if he understood, then trotted back inside to warm up by the fire. Marcus spent the rest of the morning cleaning up his house and thinking about what had happened. The blankets he had used to warm Sarah and the girls still smelled like her perfume. Something light and floral that reminded him of spring mornings. It had been 10 years since he had cared for anyone other than himself and Rex. After losing his wife Martha and their son David in the car accident, Marcus had built walls around his heart. He focused on his farm, his land, and his solitude. The property dispute with Sarah had been as much about maintaining those walls as it had been about the actual acres in question. But something had changed during those long hours by the fireplace. Watching Sarah fight for her daughters' lives had reminded him of what really mattered. Land could be surveyed and divided. Legal papers could be signed. But human life, human connection, those things were precious beyond measure. Around noon, his phone rang. It was Tom Bradley calling from the hospital. "Marcus, I wanted to update you. All three of them are going to be fine. Sarah's temperature is back to normal, and the girls are already asking when they can go home. The doctors want to keep them overnight for observation, but no permanent damage." Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "That's the best news I've heard in years." "There's something else," Tom continued. "Sarah asked me to give you her phone number. She wants to talk to you when she gets home tomorrow. Said it's important." Marcus wrote down the number, wondering what Sarah wanted to discuss. Part of him hoped she wasn't going to turn this into some big emotional scene. He had done what any decent person would do. Nothing more, nothing less. That afternoon, Marcus drove his truck out to where Sarah's Honda was still stuck in the ditch. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Everything was pristine white and beautiful. Hard to believe that just 12 hours earlier, this same landscape had been a death trap. He arranged for a tow truck to pull Sarah's car out and take it to Jerry's garage in town. The engine would need work after being exposed to the cold for so long, but the car was salvageable. As he stood there looking at the spot where he had found them, Marcus realized how close they had come to tragedy. If Rex hadn't insisted on going out into the storm, if they had searched in a different direction, if he had given up just 5 minutes sooner, he shuddered at the thought and headed home. That evening, Marcus found himself looking through old photo albums he hadn't touched in years. Pictures of Martha laughing in their kitchen, David learning to ride his bicycle in the front yard, family barbecues and Christmas mornings and ordinary Tuesday evenings that had seemed unremarkable at the time. He had forgotten how good it felt to have people to care about, people who depended on him. For 8 hours he had been responsible for 3 lives, and despite the fear and uncertainty, it had made him feel more alive than he had in years. Rex seemed to sense his master's contemplative mood. The dog settled beside Marcus's chair and rested his big head on Marcus's knee. "What do you think, boy?" Marcus asked. "Think maybe it's time for this old hermit to rejoin the human race?" Rex's tail thumped against the floor, which Marcus chose to interpret as enthusiastic agreement. Outside, the snow continued to sparkle under the moonlight, beautiful and serene. Inside, for the first time in 10 years, Marcus Johnson didn't feel alone. Tomorrow he would call Sarah Mitchell and find out what she wanted to talk about. But tonight he would sit by his fire with his faithful dog and think about second chances. Sometimes the worst storms bring the clearest skies. Sometimes enemies become friends. And sometimes a man discovers that saving someone else's life might just save his own soul in the process. Sarah stared at her phone for the 10th time that morning, Marcus's number written on a piece of paper beside it. The girls were finally asleep after their first night home from the hospital, exhausted from all the attention and excitement of the past 2 days. Now she had to make this call, but the words she needed to say felt impossible to speak. She had spent the entire night at the hospital thinking about what had happened, not just the rescue, but everything leading up to it. The 2 years of legal battles, the angry words exchanged in lawyers' offices, the way she had taught her own daughters to avoid that mean old man next door, how wrong she had been. Finally, she picked up the phone and dialed. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Hello? Marcus, it's Sarah. I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all. How are you and the girls feeling?" "Much better, thanks to you." She paused, gathering her courage. "Marcus, I need to see you. There are things I need to say that can't be said over the phone. Would you be willing to come over this afternoon? The girls are napping, so we could talk privately." There was a long silence. Sarah worried he might refuse. "I'll be there around 2 o'clock, he said finally. "Thank you." After hanging up, Sarah looked around her farmhouse with new eyes. For 2 years, she had been so focused on fighting Marcus over 3 acres of land that she had forgotten what really mattered. The house was warm and safe. Her daughters were healthy and happy, and they had a good life here. Why had she been so determined to take more land from a lonely old man? The truth was complicated and painful. After her husband died in Afghanistan 4 years ago, Sarah had thrown herself into fighting for every possible advantage, every benefit, every dollar she could claim. She had convinced herself it was about providing for the girls, but really it was about control, about having something to fight for when she felt powerless against grief and loss. The property dispute had become her way of channeling anger that had nothing to do with Marcus Johnson. At exactly 2 o'clock, she heard Rex barking in her front yard, followed by the sound of Marcus's truck pulling into her driveway. Through the window, she watched him walk to her front door, moving slowly like a man unsure of his welcome. Sarah opened the door before he could knock. "Thank you for coming." Marcus stood awkwardly on her porch, hat in his hands. "How are Emma and Lucy doing?" "See for yourself." Sarah led him to the living room where both girls were curled up on the couch under blankets, fast asleep. The doctors said they might be tired for a few more days, but no lasting effects. Marcus studied their peaceful faces. "They're tough kids. They stayed calm through the whole thing, even when they were scared. They want to see Rex again. They've been talking about him non-stop since we got home. He's in the truck if they want to say hello when they wake up." Sarah gestured to the kitchen table. "Would you like some coffee? We need to talk." They sat across from each other at the same table where Sarah had signed papers for her lawyer, the same table where she had planned her strategy for taking Marcus's land. Now it felt like sacred ground where something much more important was about to happen. Marcus, she began, then stopped. How do you thank someone for saving your children's lives? How do you apologize for 2 years of treating him like an enemy? I've been thinking about what happened, she started again. Not just the rescue, but everything that led up to it. The property dispute, the things I said about you, the way I've acted. She took a deep breath. I owe you an apology that goes way beyond thanking you for saving our lives. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Sarah, you don't need to. Yes, I do. Her voice was firm now. I need you to understand why I fought you so hard over that land. Because it had nothing to do with you and everything to do with me being angry at the world. She told him about losing her husband, about the fear of not being able to provide for the girls alone, about how fighting for every possible advantage had become her way of coping with grief. She explained how the property dispute had given her something concrete, to battle when everything else in her life felt uncertain. Made you into the enemy because I needed someone to blame for all the unfairness in the world, she said, tears starting to flow. You didn't deserve that. You were just a neighbor trying to protect land that had been in your family for generations. Marcus listened without interrupting, his weathered hands folded on the table. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I haven't exactly been a friendly neighbor, he said finally. After I lost Martha and David, I shut everyone out. I was probably ruder to you than I needed to be. You were protecting yourself. I understand that now. Sarah wiped her eyes. Marcus, I'm dropping the lawsuit. The land is yours. It always was yours. I was wrong to fight you for it. Marcus looked shocked. Sarah, you don't have to do that because of what happened. That property dispute and the rescue are two different things. No, they're not, Sarah said firmly. What happened in that storm showed me who you really are. You risked your own life to save people who had been treating you badly. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. She stood up and walked to a drawer, pulling out a thick manila folder. These are all the legal documents related to our dispute. I'm giving them to you so you can see that I'm serious about dropping this. Marcus stared at the folder but didn't take it. Sarah, that land is worth a lot of money. You'd be giving up a significant asset for your daughter's future. My daughter's future isn't about how much land we own. It's about the kind of person I teach them to be. Sarah's voice was steady now. I want them to grow up knowing that doing the right thing matters more than winning fights. I want them to have neighbors they can trust, not enemies living next door. The sound of small feet padding down the stairs interrupted them. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing her eyes. Mommy, is that Mr. Marcus? She asked sleepily. Yes, sweetheart. He came to check on how you're feeling. Emma walked directly to Marcus and climbed onto his lap without hesitation. I dreamed about Rex. Is he here? Marcus's face softened as he adjusted his arms to hold the little girl. He's in the truck outside. Would you like to see him? Yes, can Lucy see him too? Of course. Sarah watched this interaction with wonder. Just 3 days ago, she had been teaching her daughters to avoid this man. Now Emma was sitting on his lap like he was a beloved grandfather. Lucy appeared a few minutes later, also drawn by the sound of voices. Soon both girls were at the window waving at Rex, who was patiently waiting in the truck. Can we go outside and pet him? Lucy asked. Put your coats on first, Sarah said. It's still cold out there. As the girls bundled up, Marcus stood to leave. I should get going. Rex gets anxious if he's away from home too long. Marcus, wait. Sarah picked up the folder again. Please take these papers. I meant what I said about dropping the lawsuit. This time Marcus took the folder. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. They walked outside together where the girls were already greeting Rex with enthusiastic hugs. The big dog tolerated their attention with patient dignity, his tail wagging slowly. Rex is the real hero in all this, Sarah said, watching her daughters play with the dog. If he hadn't insisted on going out in that storm. Rex has good instincts about people, Marcus replied. He knew you and the girls were in trouble somehow. Emma looked up from scratching Rex behind the ears. Mr. Marcus, can we visit Rex sometimes? Mom said we could if you said okay. Marcus glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. I think Rex would like that very much. He doesn't get many visitors. What about you? Lucy asked with the directness that only children possess. Do you get lonely living by yourself? The question caught Marcus off guard. He had become so used to his solitude that he rarely thought about loneliness anymore. But looking at this small family standing in his life again after so many years of isolation, he realized how much he had missed human connection. Sometimes I do get lonely, he admitted. You could come have dinner with us sometime, Emma suggested. Mom makes really good spaghetti. Sarah smiled. Emma's right. You're welcome at our table anytime, Marcus. It's the least I can do after everything you've done for us. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the winter sun. I'd like that very much. As they prepared to part ways, Sarah extended her hand to Marcus. Neighbors? She asked. Marcus shook her hand firmly. Neighbors, he agreed. Driving home with Rex beside him, Marcus thought about how dramatically his life had changed in just 3 days. The legal battle that had consumed so much time and energy was over. The woman he had considered his enemy was now offering friendship. And for the first time in 10 years, he had somewhere to go for dinner, besides his own empty kitchen. Sometimes the worst storms really do bring the clearest skies. 6 months later, the smell of fresh apple pie drifted across the property line between the Mitchell and Johnson farms, carried by the warm June breeze. Sarah wiped flour from her hands and looked out her kitchen window to see Marcus and Rex walking across the field that had once been the source of so much conflict. The disputed 3 acres now served a much better purpose. Marcus had suggested they turn it into a shared garden space where both families could grow vegetables. The girls had been thrilled with the idea, and Sarah had to admit that gardening was more satisfying than legal battles. Emma and Lucy spotted Marcus and Rex approaching and ran out to meet them. The girls had become regular visitors at Marcus's house, and he had transformed from a lonely hermit into something resembling a doting grandfather. Rex followed the girls everywhere, as if he had appointed himself their permanent guardian. Did you bring the corn? Lucy called out as she reached Marcus. 3 dozen ears fresh picked this morning, Marcus replied, holding up 2 full baskets. Rex helped me choose the best ones. Rex is the smartest dog in the whole world, Emma declared, giving the German Shepherd a hug around the neck. Sarah met them at the back door. Perfect timing. The pie just came out of the oven, and I was about to start on the cornbread. This had become their Sunday routine over the past few months. Marcus would bring vegetables from his garden, Sarah would cook a big family dinner, and they would all eat together on her back porch, watching the sun set over the Nebraska farmland. How's the lawsuit going? Marcus asked as they settled around the picnic table Sarah had bought specifically for these gatherings. Sarah laughed. Which one? The one where I'm suing myself for being an idiot for 2 years? I meant the Henderson case, Marcus said with a grin. Sarah had taken on a pro bono case helping an elderly farmer fight a corporation trying to buy his land through intimidation tactics. Oh, that one. We won, Sarah announced casually, then smiled at Marcus's surprised expression. Got the call this morning. Mr. Henderson gets to keep his farm and the corporation has to pay damages for harassment. Mom's a hero, Emma chimed in. She's fighting the bad guys now instead of fighting the good guys. Marcus raised his glass of lemonade. To fighting the right battles. To second chances, Sarah added, clinking her glass against his. As they ate dinner, the conversation flowed easily between farming advice, the girls' summer plans, and Marcus's stories about growing up on this same land 60 years ago. It amazed Sarah how natural this felt, like they had been family friends for years instead of former enemies. Rex lay contentedly under the table, occasionally receiving scraps from the girls despite Sarah's half-hearted protests. The dog had put on weight since becoming part of their extended family, and his coat gleamed with health and happiness. I have something to tell you all, Marcus said as they finished eating. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I've made a decision. The girls looked up with interest, and Sarah felt a flutter of concern. In her experience, announcements that started this way were rarely good news. I'm thinking about getting another dog to keep Rex company, Marcus continued. He's been so good with you girls that I think he might enjoy having a puppy around the house. Emma and Lucy practically exploded with excitement. Can we help pick out the puppy? What kind of dog? When are you getting it? Can we help train it? Marcus laughed at their enthusiasm. Well, I was hoping you might want to help me choose. There's a litter of German Shepherd puppies at the rescue shelter in town. I thought we could all go look at them next weekend. Sarah felt her heart warm at the word we. 6 months ago, she would have been suspicious of any suggestion Marcus made. Now she trusted him completely with her daughter's happiness. I think that sounds wonderful, she said. The girls have been asking for a dog of their own, but I wasn't sure I could handle a puppy by myself. Well, Maybe the puppy could spend time at both houses, Marcus suggested carefully. That way the girls could help raise it and Rex would have company during the day. It was a perfect solution, and Sarah marveled again at how thoughtful Marcus had become about including all of them in his plans. The man who had once barely acknowledged their existence now went out of his way to make them feel like family. As the evening wound down and they cleaned up the dinner dishes, Sarah found herself thinking about the strange turns life could take. 6 months ago, she had been preparing to battle Marcus in court over land that didn't even matter to her anymore. Tonight, she was planning to help him choose a puppy that would become part of both their families. The girls ran inside to get a board game they wanted to teach Marcus, leaving Sarah and Marcus alone on the porch with Rex at their feet. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said quietly. "The lawyer called yesterday with the final paperwork on dropping the lawsuit. It's official now, the land dispute is completely closed." Marcus nodded. "How do you feel about it?" "Relieved, free." Sarah looked out at the garden they had planted together on the disputed acres. Tomatoes and peppers were starting to ripen, and the corn stalks were tall and healthy. "I can't believe I wasted 2 years fighting over something so meaningless." "It wasn't meaningless to you at the time," Marcus said gently. "You were protecting your family the best way you knew how, and you were protecting your family's legacy. We were both doing what we thought was right." Sarah turned to look at him. "I'm just grateful that storm happened when it did. Grateful for a blizzard that nearly killed you and the girls." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Grateful for whatever force in the universe made you and Rex go out in that storm to find us. Grateful for the chance to discover that my enemy was actually one of the best men I've ever known." Marcus felt his cheeks redden. Even after 6 months of friendship, compliments still made him uncomfortable. "Rex deserves all the credit." "Rex has excellent judgment," Sarah agreed, reaching down to scratch the dog's ears. "He knew we belonged together as a family before any of us humans figured it out." The girls returned with their board game, and soon the 4 of them were engaged in a competitive game of Monopoly. Emma and Lucy ganged up against the adults, while Rex provided moral support by resting his head on whichever player was losing. As the evening grew late, and Marcus prepared to leave, Lucy threw her arms around his waist. "I love you." "Mr. Marcus," she said simply. Emma joined the hug. "You're the best neighbor in the whole world." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. It had been so long since anyone had told him they loved him that he had almost forgotten how it felt. "I love you girls too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than you know." Sarah watched this scene with deep satisfaction. Her daughters had gained not just a friend, but a grandfather figure who would be part of their lives for years to come. And she had gained something she hadn't even known she needed, a partner in life's daily challenges and joys. As Marcus and Rex walked home across the moonlit field, Sarah stood on her porch watching until they disappeared into their own house. Then she gathered her daughters and headed inside to get them ready for bed. "Mom," Emma said as Sarah tucked her in, "are you and Mr. Marcus going to get married?" Sarah nearly choked on her surprise. "What makes you ask that?" "You smile at him the way you used to smile at Daddy," Lucy observed from the next bed. "And he looks at you like you're special." Sarah considered this. Over the past few months, she had noticed changes in how she felt around Marcus. The gratitude had evolved into genuine affection. The friendship had deepened into something that felt like it could become more, given time. "I don't know what will happen," she told her daughters honestly, "but I know that having Mr. Marcus and Rex in our lives makes everything better." "Good," Emma said sleepily. "I want them to stay forever." "Forever sounds just right," Sarah agreed, kissing both girls goodnight. Outside, the Nebraska wind whispered through the cornstalks in their shared garden, carrying with it the promise of harvest time and the gentle hope of new beginnings. Sometimes the worst storms bring the most beautiful clearings. Sometimes enemies become family. And sometimes a dog's instincts can save more than just 3 lives. They can save 3 hearts and teach them how to love again.